There is something inside your head right now that is more complex than anything humanity has ever built. More complex than any computer. More complex than any city. More complex than the entire internet. More complex than any machine, any software, any communications network the world's most brilliant engineers have ever designed. And this thing works right now, this second, as you listen to it, processing sound, translating words into meaning, generating emotions, accessing memories, formulating opinions, all at the same time, without getting hot, without freezing, without needing to refresh. And the question that no one asks, the question that should be asked before any other when it comes to the meaning of life, the existence of God, the nature of reality, is this: how did it get here? How did the most complex object in the known universe end up inside your skull? How did 86 billion neurons, connected by 100 trillion synapses, organized into networks that produce consciousness, language, creativity, love, morals, humor, imagination, memory, and the ability to ask why we exist? How did it all come about? Accident? Chance? Cosmic luck? Blind matter stumbling in complexity for billions of years until, by statistical miracle, something emerged that could think about itself? Or project, intention, design, a mind that knew what it was doing? I want to take you on a journey that a specific man took. A man who knows the code that builds the human brain better than anyone in history, who read each of the 3 billion letters of the human genome, who oversaw the biggest project in modern biology. And he began this journey as a convinced atheist and ended on his knees before God. Francis Collins. And his story is not a story of emotional weakness. It is a story of intellectual strength, from a man who followed the evidence with the same rigor he applied to any scientific research, and that the evidence led to a place he didn't expect. I didn't want to, but he couldn't deny it. Before I get into his journey, I need to show you what's inside his head, because most people have no idea what they're carrying. They have no idea of the absurd machine that operates silently behind their eyes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from birth to death, without stopping for even a second. The human brain weighs about 1 kilogram and 400 grams, fits in both hands. It is made up of 75% water. From the outside, it looks like a shriveled piece of meat, nothing visually impressive, but inside it is a cathedral of complexity that makes any work of human engineering look like a child's drawing. 86 billion neurons. Each neuron is a cell specialized in transmitting information, and each of these neurons can connect to up to 10,000 other neurons. The result is a network of approximately 100 trillion synaptic connections. 100 trillion. To get an idea of what this number means, if you counted one connection per second, it would take more than 3 million years to count them all. And this network is not static, it's dynamic. Connections grow stronger when used. They weaken when neglected. They constantly reorganize themselves in response to experiences. Every conversation you have, every book you read, every emotion you feel, every thought you think, physically changes the structure of your brain. You are literally a different person every day because your brain continually rebuilds itself. The energy consumption of this system is astonishing for such a small structure. The brain represents 2% of body weight, but consumes 20% of energy, burn calories all the time, even when you sleep. Because even when sleeping, the brain is working, consolidating memories, processing emotions of the day, clearing metabolic waste, reorganizing connections. Sleep is not rest for the brain, it's maintenance. And what this network produces is something that transcends any technical description. Language, the ability to transform thoughts into words and transmit them to another mind. No other animal does this to the degree we do. No other animal tells stories. No other animal writes poetry. No other animal debates philosophy. Human language is a chasm between us and the rest of the animal kingdom. Creativity. The ability to imagine things that don't exist and then make them exist. To see a stone and imagine a cathedral. To hear silence and imagine a symphony. Looking at a blank page and imagining a novel. No computer does this. No algorithm does this. Genuine creativity, the ability to create something truly new, is uniquely human and completely inexplicable in purely mechanical terms. Conscience, the biggest mystery of all, the subjective experience. The fact that there is something which is being you. That you are not just an information processor. It's someone who knows who processes. Someone who feels. Someone who experiments. Someone who wonders. Morality. The sense of right and wrong that doesn't come from biology, that doesn't come from culture, that doesn't come from education, which is there before all this, like a law engraved deep within your being. Love, the ability to care about another human being to the point of sacrifice, to put the good of others above one's own, to feel pain due to the pain of others, to feel joy for the joy of others, all of this in a box weighing 1 kilo and 400 grams. And now I want you to ask yourself an honest question. Look at this list. 86 billion neurons. 100 trillion connections, language, creativity, conscience, morality, love. And he asks, does this look like an accident? Does this seem like the result of blind forces that had no purpose, direction, or intelligence? Does this seem like something matter produced on its own with no mind behind it? Francis Collins asked this question. And I'll tell you what he found when he looked for the answer. Collins was not predisposed to encounter God. On the contrary, he grew up in a secular environment. He studied chemistry at the University of Virginia. He then earned a doctorate in chemical physics at Yale. He was a tough scientist, empiricist, materialistic. I thought everything could be reduced to atoms and molecules, that emotions were chemistry, what thought was electricity, that consciousness was illusion, and that God was a dispensable hypothesis invented by people who didn't have the courage to face a meaningless universe. And then he switched to medicine. He entered medical school in North Carolina. And there, for the first time in his life, he came into contact with something that chemistry and physics had not prepared him to face: human suffering. Collins began treating patients with serious illnesses, patients dying, and he expected to find despair, anger, revolt against an unjust universe. But in many cases, it found the opposite, found peace, a peace that made no sense within materialism. Patients who spoke of God with a naturalness and conviction that Collins could not dismiss as delusion. Patients who faced death with a serenity that he, the healthy atheist, did not have. And one patient in particular changed everything. An elderly woman with terminal heart disease who, after talking about her faith, looked at Collins and asked with the simplicity of someone asking a genuine question, "Doctor, what do you believe?" Collins had no answer. And he realized, at that moment, something that deeply embarrassed him. He had rejected God without ever examining the evidence. He, who as a scientist would never publish a conclusion without examining the data, had formed the most important opinion of his life without examining anything at all. I had dismissed God out of prejudice, not evidence, and his intellectual honesty did not allow this to continue, so he started investigating. The first thing Collins encountered was the moral argument, and it hit him with a force he hadn't expected. Collins knew he had a moral sense. I felt that certain things were genuinely right and others were genuinely wrong. Not as a preference. How true. And I had never questioned where it came from, until he read C.S. Lewis. And Lewis asked a question that demolished Collins's materialism in a few pages. If the universe is just matter, where does the moral law come from? Where does the universal feeling that certain things shouldn't happen come from? If we are just atoms obeying the laws of physics, why do we feel that torturing innocent people is wrong? Atoms are neither right nor wrong. They just are. And Collins realized that evolution does not explain morality satisfactorily. It can explain basic social instincts. It may explain why we cooperate as a group, but it can't explain why we feel we should do the right thing even when no one is looking, even when it costs us dearly, even when it goes against our survival. People throw themselves into rivers to save strangers. They risk their lives to hide from being persecuted. They donate kidneys to strangers. They dedicate their entire lives to caring for those who cannot reciprocate. None of this makes evolutionary sense. Natural selection should eliminate this type of behavior because it reduces the individual's chances of survival and reproduction. But it didn't eliminate it. Radical altruism persists in every culture, in every era, in every human society. Collins looked at this and felt he was faced with something that science couldn't explain. A universally recognized moral law that transcended biology, and it pointed to something, or someone, that put it there. But that was just the beginning. Because Collins wasn't the kind of person who could be convinced by a single argument. He needed convergence. I needed multiple lines of evidence to point in the same direction. And that's exactly what I found true. When Collins entered the field of genetics and began working on the Human Genome Project, the evidence multiplied. Because what he found inside the human cell was something that materialism had great difficulty explaining. DNA is information. That's the word Collins uses repeatedly. Coded information. A language with a 4-letter alphabet that carries functional instructions for building and maintaining a living organism. And information in the universal human experience always comes from a mind, always, no known exception. Books don't write themselves. Computer programs do not program themselves. Messages do not arise by chance. Throughout human experience, every time we encounter coded, functional information, the source is an intelligence. Every time, no exception. And DNA is the most sophisticated information system there is, more than any software. More than any programming language, more than any database. The amount of information stored in a single gram of DNA is greater than anything humanity has ever written, filmed, and recorded in history. All. Every book, every film, every article, every message, every email, everything fits in a gram of DNA with space to spare. And did this system come about by chance Mindless, no design, no author? Collins couldn't accept this, not as a scientist, because the scientist in him knew that information requires an informational source. What code requires an encoder? What language does an author require? And DNA was the most sophisticated language he had ever encountered. But the evidence that sealed everything for Collins, the one that closed the case for good, was something more personal, more human, more impossible to ignore: the conscience. Collins knew that the brain is matter: neurons, synapses, neurotransmitters, everything physical, everything measurable, everything describable in chemical and electrical terms. But he also knew, with the certainty of someone who is conscious, that his experience as a human being cannot be reduced to chemistry. That the love he feels for his family isn't just oxytocin. That the beauty he sees in a landscape is not just activation of the visual cortex. That the feeling of being alive is not just metabolism. And science cannot bridge the gap between the two. It cannot explain how unconscious matter produces conscious experience. It can describe neural mechanisms in increasingly greater detail, but describing the mechanism is not explaining the experience. It's like describing all the pigments and all the brushstrokes in a painting without explaining what the painting means. The meaning is not in the pigments. It's somewhere the pigments can't reach. And Collins realized that consciousness is the most direct and most undeniable evidence that reality is more than matter. Because consciousness is the most certain thing there is. More certain than any scientific theory, more certain than any experimental data, and yet it is completely inexplicable in materialistic terms. And when Collins put it all together, the moral law that transcends biology, the information in DNA that demands an author, the consciousness that transcends matter, the fine-tuning of the universe that requires calibration, the beginning of the universe that demands a cause, he saw that all the lines converged. They all pointed in the same direction, a direction he spent years avoiding, the direction his atheism didn't want to go, but that his intellectual honesty demanded. And Collins knelt. Not in a temple, on an ordinary morning, walking in nature, looking at an icy waterfall in the mountains. And at that moment he felt that all the evidence he had accumulated over years of investigation crystallized into certainty, not just intellectual, existential, total. He knew that God existed, that the universe had an author, that life had purpose, and that the code he had spent years deciphering was a love letter written by the Creator. And when Collins presented the results of the Human Genome Project at a White House conference, he said something that shocked some of the scientific community. He said the human genome was the language of God, not as a pious metaphor, like the conviction of a scientist who read the code and recognized the signature of an intelligence. Now, I want to talk to you about something that is perhaps the most important of everything I have said today, because arguments are important. Evidence is important. But in the end, this conversation is not about arguments. It's about you. If your brain is an accident, what does that mean for your life? It means everything you think is just chemistry, that the conclusions he draws are unreliable because they were produced by a mechanism that was not designed to find truth, only to survive, that the love you feel is not real in the deepest sense. It's useful, yes, functionally valuable for survival and reproduction, but not real in a sense that transcends biology. It means the pain you feel doesn't have meaning. It's just neurons signaling damage. No purpose, no redemption, no reason to exist beyond the blind mechanics of evolution. It means when you die, it's over, completely, permanently. Everything you felt, thought, loved, built, dreamed of disappears as if it had never existed, and the universe doesn't notice, don't care, because there's no one to care. But if the brain is not an accident, if it was designed by a mind that knew what it was doing, everything changes. Your thoughts are trustworthy because the mind that produces them was made to find truth. The love you feel is real because it was placed in you on purpose by someone you love. The pain you carry has meaning because it is part of a larger story that someone is telling. And death is not the end because the consciousness that inhabits your brain is not a byproduct of matter. It is something that was given to you by someone who exists beyond matter. And I know maybe you're in a place where these words hurt instead of comfort. Maybe life is so heavy that hearing that there is a purpose seems like a cruel joke. Maybe you lost someone. Maybe I'm alone. Maybe you look in the mirror and don't see anything worthwhile. But Collins would tell you, with the authority of someone who has read the code that built you, that you were made with more care than you realize, that each gene was selected, that every instruction was planned, that every neuron in your brain has been predicted, that someone wrote 3 billion letters for you to exist, not by chance, by choice, by intention, for love. And when Collins looks at the human brain, when he contemplates the most complex network in the known universe, when he reads the code that builds it, when he marvels at the consciousness it produces, he sees no accident. See art, see design. See the most extraordinary work of a creator who not only wanted the universe to exist, but wanted you to exist. Specifically, you, with its particularities, with your talents, with its flaws, with its unique and unrepeatable way of being in the world. And this is not blind faith. It's the conclusion of one of the greatest living scientists after examining the evidence with relentless rigor for decades. It is the result of an investigation that began with convinced atheism and ended with reasoned faith. That's what happens when an honest man follows the data where it leads, even when the destination is unexpected. Your brain is no accident. It is the most eloquent, most complex, and most beautiful proof that someone thought of everything, that someone wrote the code, that someone designed the network, that someone wanted consciousness to exist, that love existed, may beauty exist, that you existed. And all Collins asks, all I ask, is that you consider this possibility with the same honesty that he did. Look at the complexity of what's inside your head. Look at the code that built you. Look at the consciousness that inhabits you. Look at the love you feel. And he asks honestly, accident or project? Collins asked the question, and the answer changed his life. Maybe change yours too. If this made something move inside you, leave a like. If it made you look at yourself in a way you never had before, comment below. If someone comes to mind, share. Subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next one.